Good morning. This is the Successful Funding Show. I'm Carl Dakin, the Capital Coach, and we're going to talk about funding. And today we're going to talk about funding projects, investment opportunities, real estate, and other things in the country of Belize. I have with me as my guest Boris Mannsfeld, who is a person who splits his time between the United States and Belize with operation of a real estate agency in Placencia, Belize, where he gets to sell some beautiful properties. He gets to sell islands, which is still on my bucket list. And he's also engaged with a lot of things in the community here, there, and wherever. So I couldn't find a person more knowledgeable about Belize and doing things in Belize than Boris. And we actually have just started doing a monthly live stream show called Belize Real Estate and Lifestyles. The next episode of that show will be on December 18th in a couple of weeks. So if you're interested in learning more about Belize, stay tuned, tune in at that time. With that, what we usually talk about is different issues from the entrepreneur standpoint, usually a small business or a community that is trying to raise funding. And we then flip over to the other side of the equation and we look at things from an investor perspective. What do they need to see? What do they need to hear? What information is required for them to reach an investment decision? And so we look at it from 360 degrees, and hopefully we can shed some light on it this morning with our program. So with that, Boris, good morning.
Good morning. Hi, Carl. Good seeing you. I like your backdrop. I see you got your mountains in the background. It looks a little chilly.
It's a little chilly. The sun isn't quite risen yet. I'm working remotely this week from Vail, Colorado, where the temperature is about 10 to 15 degrees chillier than in Denver. And I would guess then it's about 40 to 50 degrees chillier than it is in Belize.
Yeah, it's nice and warm in Belize, that's for sure.
So just to kick things off, there are so many things that a person can do in Belize. They can buy property for their own personal use. They can buy property for commercial use. They can split it where they use it part-time and they rent it out part-time. And this is a good part of the, if you will call it the business of Belize, is tourism.
Yep.
So we can switch over to coconut plantations and other types of things here in the conversation. We'll go where the conversation leads us. But so Boris, as you know, I'm interested in buying some property in Belize, but I certainly with my schedule can't live down there 52 weeks of the year. So I'm thinking of doing something like buying a property, and I would probably want to rent it out either through an Airbnb or put it under property management. And to do that, I want to buy the property today, but I don't have all the money I need to buy the property. Am I stuck, or are there options for me to obtain funding like we would in the United States, where I could put down so much money and borrow the balance?
Yeah, that's a great question, Carl. As you know, Belize is primarily a cash real estate market. There really is not a lot of lending available in Belize for foreigners. So it's primarily a cash market, but there are ways to get around that somewhat. One reason it's more of a cash market in Belize, we have very few banks in Belize, and some of them will lend on real estate, but the problem is most of the banks there will only lend Belize dollars. Luckily, the Belize dollar is tied to the U.S. dollar 2-to-1, so that's a security and it gives some reassurance. However, most of the sellers that sell real estate in Belize, they want U.S. dollars. So in order for a buyer then to pay in U.S. dollars, they'll have a tough time going to a local bank to get U.S. dollars because they only lend really in Belize dollars. there is one bank in Belize that will lend. The bank is called Key Bank, and it will lend to foreigners. They have certain limits. I think it's a $750,000 loan limit, and it goes through a normal mortgage program that you apply for. So that's one option, but very limited in Belize. Another option that a lot of investors end up doing in the States, they end up just borrowing money on a HELOC, a home equity line of credit, or they tap into one of their other investments. Either if they have a stock portfolio or maybe some rental properties, they can borrow money that way. And a lot of times that's the cheapest way to go, because HELOCs are usually charge a pretty low interest rate. So a lot of people end up doing it that way. On occasion, we do have owner financing in Belize. So some sellers will lend, usually it's up to 50% of the property value, and they'll usually do a promissory note, 3 to 5 years with a balloon payment at the end. Usually that way it works, and that way it gives the buyer an opportunity to get their funding in order in a more structured way. One thing you got to remember also is that banks here in the U.S. will not lend on collateral in Belize. The reason they won't is they're just not set up for it. They don't know the laws. They don't have an attorney set up down there, and it's too small of a market down there for a bank like Chase or Wells Fargo to issue mortgages in Belize. It's just too small. I know banks in the U.S. will say they'll lend, but once you go through the process and they start getting into details, and you got your ambitious banker, he's like, oh yeah, I'll give you money. Oh yeah, we can do anything. Well, after a couple of weeks, they don't call you back anymore.
Yeah, no, I'm very familiar with that. As a person who provides consulting services to businesses on raising capital, I have a target on my forehead right here for every lending agency in the United States, and they will have their callers. These are people who are not loan officers; they're just finders.
Yeah.
They call me all the time and they say, well, when do you want to schedule the appointment to get your loan set up? And, you go through 2 or 3 of those and you're thinking, well, maybe it's just me, maybe it's the deal, but it really gets down, as you say, there's no way that you're going to meet the lending criteria for that institution.
Yeah.
And this is because if there is a default on a loan, then that particular lending institution doesn't really have a mechanism to go down to Belize, take foreclose on the property, take possession, and sell it off to pay off the loan. And maybe that's a service that you and I provide banks to help them lend on properties in Belize, because the laws are pretty straightforward. They're not nearly as complicated as they are in the United States. You hold fee title direct in the property, so you don't get caught up in a whole bunch of other things that might happen if you were in the United States or elsewhere. So before we go on, I'm going to drill down on a couple of your answers. First, I'd like to say hello to Don Cohen this morning. Don, thanks for being in the audience this morning. And the Belize Valuable Insights with Carl and Boris. I'm going to blame Restream for breaking that word in half and not attribute that to you, Don. So, but Don is one of my mentors, advisors on putting out information through LinkedIn, including this LinkedIn live show. And I've been working with Don for over a year now. And with my newsletter, Instant Funding newsletter, that goes out now 5 times a week on Monday through Friday. And this show, which is every Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. So Don, thanks for being in the audience. And then we have Zach is in the audience this morning. Zach is putting together a company that will provide fractional investment into real estate, and probably be a good idea to get a conversation going with Zach to see if some of the investors that he thinks he can target with fractional ownership investments might have an interest in playing a role in the country of Belize to fill this gap that currently exists in how you go about financing properties down there. So Zach, I need to talk to you anyway, so expect an email or something from me later, because I have a couple projects that are perking up and may be ready for us all to sit down and talk together. So,
And if I can jump in there real quick too,
yeah,
Carl, we do have a few fractional ownership projects in Belize that have been really successful, especially in the Placencia area. A good friend of mine, David, he's a developer from Texas. He's done quite a few fractional projects in Belize. Um, and I mean, it's a very simple process. You set up a company, it has, let's say, 10 shares, you get 10 investors, everybody gets 10%. They put up the money, they buy a house or a condo or an island or a resort, whatever it may be. And then, especially if it's a house or a condo, usually the way it works, then there's on-site property management set up, and the property gets rented out through VRBO and Airbnb. And then every owner gets, 5 weeks out of the year of usage. And you can either use those 5 weeks how you like. You can occupy it, send it to, let your family go there, let your friends go there, use it for a charity auction or whatever, or you can rent it out part of all of those 5 weeks, and then whatever rental income you get, goes to you. So it's a pretty common, I would say common, but it's been a proven and successful strategy in Belize that has worked really well.
yeah, and I think that you've provided a good explanation for those in the audience who may not be familiar with fractional ownership. It's basically what the words try to describe, which is instead of having a single owner who holds the deed to the property, there's a structure that is created where you can have multiple owners. Now, that can be done in two different fashions. One is where you have multiple owners of the property directly, where you have what is called joint tenants in common, is the term we use here in the United States. And I will tell you that this is very complicated of moving somebody onto and off of the ownership of that particular property. And it's not something that I would get into lightly. I've had a lot of times where families or neighbors have gotten together to buy a property in common in the mountains, like the one I'm in now. And unfortunately, things change. And when that happens, trying to unravel or straighten or do a transfer of ownership gets quite cumbersome.
Yep.
Where if you, and real estate, the reason why it's more common is that to a large degree, it's supposedly simpler to own real estate than it is to invest in a security. But I think that has changed. I think that's now an issue of the past. So now, instead of owning the property directly or splitting it in joint tenancy, you have a company. You set up the company, and the company buys an asset, which is the property that we're talking about. And you can have two owners in the company. You can have 24 owners in the company. So Boris laid out an example of 10 owners, each getting 5 weeks during the year. You could have 50 owners, each getting 1 week during the year.
Yep.
And this is one of the advantages of fractional ownership, is that you can slice and dice this any way you want, where you could have units in the ownership of the property, in the company that holds the property. And then one person could have 2 weeks, one could have 10 weeks, the next one could have 1 week. And it's very easy. And transferring ownership now is very, very simple. It's simply the sale of your ownership in the company, whether it's units in an LLC membership or it's shares of stock in a corporation. And
if I could jump in there real quick too, Carl. One thing I'd like to point out, which is Carl's made a very good point, how much easier it is to transfer ownership in a company. In Belize, every time you transfer a title in Belize, you got to pay an 8% fee to the government. So when you buy a property in Belize, no matter what it is, you got to pay 8%. And also, whenever you change title, so let's say you buy the property in two different names, like Carl mentioned, a joint tenant. Well, once you add or change one of those people off that list, you've got to again pay 8% of the value of the property. So every time you do this little change, you're paying 8%. So if you're making 10% return on your rental income, you take away 8% every time you do that, and you're down to 2%. So having a company is much more, as Carl mentioned, easier, as well as way more financially beneficial.
Yeah. So there's lots of issues here that I think are very important when people think about investing in property. As I said, traditionally, when I was growing up through most of my career, people would buy property directly and they wanted their name on the deed, and that was viewed as the better route to go. But in the United States, particularly with the passage of the Jobs Act and the ability of anyone 18 or older to invest into something like a company, you may find that you could put this out to the public. It would tell everyone about it. You could invite people to come in. And this is one of the things that Zach is working towards, is setting up systems, back office, infrastructure, and the like, to make this easier, so that if you bought 2 weeks of time by buying into a company that owns a beach house in Belize, then you could transfer that ownership quickly through an exchange at a digital level, with a greater ease of speed and a greater ability to promote or advertise the fact that you want to sell the property. It may turn out, this has been one of the greater problems in any common property ownership, is, well, who's going to step into the shoes of the person who holds the property rights, whether it's deeded as real estate or it's an ownership in a company. Well, a secondary market, as we call it, this is the resale of an original purchase of ownership in a company. This is being facilitated more and more day by day. We're seeing more and more markets pop up where people go, I will help facilitate your sale of your property, of your ownership in that company. And in this case, what we get is we get more opportunities to do that. So Zach asked the question that I'll throw up here on the screen, is how do fractional owners currently transfer or sell their ownership?
Now, you're talking about in Belize, for example?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a simple process, just like in the States. You just do a transfer of shares. But Belize is also, there's different strategies to utilize. The best way to set it up would be for a foreign company to actually own a local company, which would own the asset. That would be the best way to do the transfers, because then the foreign company, especially if you're in the U.S. base, it's very easy to update your database and your shareholders and all that. It's just a matter of a one-page form, and boom, your shares transfer. And then the title in the Belize entity is still owned by the U.S. entity, and then the Belize entity then owns the property. So that way, the ownership remains the same from the get-go. The Belize company owns it, and you're just updating the U.S. company. The thing is, in the past, there have been lots of loopholes in Belize how to minimize taxes, just like you have in every country. And one loophole was in Belize for a long time is that the 8% stamp duty, which is the transfer tax, will only really apply to individuals. So what people did, they just set up companies, and then they would transfer the shares, or basically sell 100% of the company to another buyer. And then that way the buyer would avoid paying that stamp duty. That trick has long gone. So some people still say, oh yeah, you can do that, but you really can't, because what you have to do when you do transfer, or when you have a company in Belize that owns real estate, it has to be registered with the company registry, which is an agency that updates all the companies. And when you go in there, in the old days, you could just change the ownership and they'd be like, no big deal, and you could transfer ownership for $1. Now they caught on, so they know usually when you transfer an ownership in a company that owns real estate, you're doing it to try to avoid some of these taxes. So they will no longer let you do that until you pay that tax. So the way to get around that is to have a U.S. company or a Canadian or an offshore company, Seychelles, Bahamas, wherever. It owns the local company, and then the transfer is actually out of Belize. It's actually in the U.S.
No, that's very good to know that this is the way to allow for greater flexibility in change of ownership without triggering the tax. Because in Belize, one of the cool things about Belize is they don't have property taxes in the same way that we have here in the United States, where every time the value of your property goes up, so does your property tax, and you have to pay property taxes year in, year out. And this is particularly bad for people on fixed incomes. So if I were deciding I was going to retire into Belize and I wanted to basically buy this property and go through this, I wouldn't want to put myself in a position where I was buying property where each year I was afraid the government was going to raise taxes and price me out of the property altogether. In
Yeah,
Belize, it's a very nominal annual tax, some small dollar amount,
that's correct.
and it doesn't change that much. So it's all good.
Yeah, the way we obviously have a property tax system in Belize that's well established. It just has a very low fee. Most property taxes on a condominium or a beach house or or a lot is going to be anywhere from $25 to $75 a year. So you're not going to get this, $10,000 to $20,000 tax bill every year. And also, if you don't pay your taxes in Belize, which you should pay them on time, but if you don't, they just accrue, and then you have a small late fee, and then also an interest on that amount. But when it's $75 that's due, first of all, you should be able to pay $75, and if you're buying it in Belize, but furthermore, the fees and even the late penalties are minimal, and they don't then do tax auctions and stuff like that. It just accrues on your tax account, and when you ever turn around to sell your property, then you got to pay the bill. Yeah, it's pretty
Okay.
cool.
So, getting back to Zach's question a little bit, for those who have not been involved in owning property through a company, uh, essentially your rights in the company are reflected in your ownership. It could be a membership in an LLC, a limited liability company, or it could be shares in a corporation, or it might even be partnership shares if you're going into a general or limited partnership. But those transfers occur like any other sale in a private company. You have to have a buyer. They're willing to, take title ownership of your ownership rights, and when you do that, there's a contract for sale. Should be in writing, spelling out any details of that transaction. And then the company may have issued a written certificate. This is, again, kind of a thing of the past, but the company should be keeping a registry of all the owners of the company, knowing what their percentages of ownership are, which is what they're required to have for reporting purposes to the IRS or to anybody else. And so commonly today we issue what we call digital certificates, which is simply a statement. We might even dress it up with a nice, pretty picture and call it a certificate. But more importantly, it's the books and records of the company that reflect who owns what in that company. And when a transfer occurs, the buyer and seller notify the company that the transfer is going to take place. In some cases, there may be restrictions on that transfer because if it's a group of friends who bought a piece of property, they don't want to necessarily invite a stranger into their group. And so they may have a right of first refusal by the existing other owners of the company to buy that unit before it goes out to the public and so forth. So if you have ownership in a company that is buying real estate in fractional, you want to read the details, all the rules and restrictions upon what you can and cannot do. But at some point, you may be able to sell it either to another member of the company or to somebody in the public. Should be a contract. You'll notify the company. They'll make the necessary update on their ownership registry, and everything is good at that point. So that's all the mechanical elements. But I think part of Zane's question was going to selling. And selling includes promotion, putting it out there, letting other people know. So again, in a private entity where you've got a bunch of friends or business associates who own the property together, you simply will just notify everybody else who's a member of the company that you have an intent to sell and see if anybody wants to take you up on your offer. If you're going to put it out to the public, you're pretty much on your own. There's no restriction upon you making a sale of your ownership in a private company here in the United States. And it's a matter of how well can you share your message to a large group of people, hopefully finding someone who is willing to step up, step in, and take over your ownership rights. And this is where it gets hard, because in a secondary market, as we call it, which is the resale of the original purchase of an ownership in a company, there is no really single marketplace like you see for public stocks. You're pretty much on your own, whether you're going to list it on Craigslist or you're going to put it up on any of the other bulletin boards or public things. There is a way to do that, but you may or may not be reaching the audience you're looking for. And this becomes the challenge when you buy into a private company. So we have another person who's joined us this morning, Usman. Good morning. Glad to see that you're following the show today.
Hi, good morning.
Usman, I'm fairly certain, if I recall correctly, you're not in the United States. So, if you want to share with us which country you're coming from, that would be good. Boris, in this regard, the person wants to invest in property now. We know that the local banks, other than Key Bank, are not providing mortgage lending like we have in the United States. You probably cannot get a U.S. bank to lend on you for property down there. So it's cash, it's the seller, and maybe fractional ownership of ways of getting more funding into a property. Does it make a difference if the property is purely for personal reasons versus business, or it's split between personal and business?
I think that's really irrelevant. Because you really don't have any big tax advantages in Belize if it's a corporate owned or a personally owned property. The real estate taxes are the same. The income tax on your rental income is going to be the same. And that's, as Carl mentioned earlier, there are definitely some tax advantages in Belize. For instance, rental income tax is only 1.75% of the gross rent. So that's all you pay in income tax. So you have a lot less tax burden also when you buy these fractional ownership or just straight out ownership rental properties such as VRBO and Airbnb types of houses. There really isn't any, difference if it's personal or business. One thing I would like to point out regarding lending, I have been in touch with a U.S.-based private bank that they're setting up a lending program or trying to set it up in Belize. Right now, they're already approved and already are lending on properties in Belize, but you've got to have U.S.-based assets to secure the collateral. Or to secure the loan. So they've already got that set up and they're running with it. And now they're working in the direction of lending based on Belize property being the collateral. So they're not quite there yet on that one, but they're getting there. So I do have some contact information if anybody's interested. Yeah, so
okay.
It's getting better and better.
Yeah. No, I expect that with the large volume of people that are buying property in Belize, and the favorable tax status, and more people looking at retirement. And as you all know, if you've read the papers recently, half of Hollywood moved out of the country here in the last few weeks. So they all got to move somewhere.
Go Belize, yeah.
Go Belize.
I got a piece of paradise that's available, like real paradise, not the sandy beaches in Ohio or something.
Yeah. No, those are covered in snow right now, like they are here in Colorado. Part of my question I was getting at was if I buy like a 10-unit cottage hotel down there, and now I'm moving to a more purely commercial look at buying property in Belize. Does the fact that I have rental income make a difference to any of the lenders that we've been talking about, or is there a different group of lenders that now enter the picture?
Currently, I don't think that's a very important aspect. I think the lenders are strictly looking at the loan to value. Obviously, they want to make sure that the borrower is able to repay the loan too. So they're obviously going to look at, cash flow, income, and all that. But it doesn't necessarily have to be tied directly to that property.
Okay. Um, Yeah, I'm very familiar with the outside collateral rule. I got beat up earlier this week where somebody goes, "Oh, we have loans available to you. Oh, by the way, you have to give us collateral in your house, your car,
Yeah.
everything you own."
Your children, your dog, everything. Yeah.
Children's another issue that might be open for discussion, but uh, the but yeah, it's very common when you're borrowing money for the lender to try to reduce their risk by having assets pledged against the loan, so that in the event of default, those assets can be sold. And as you might suspect, those assets which are most attractive to a lender are those that are easily transferred, like title to a car, something, gold bars, if that's in your thing, well, we won't go down that path, that conversation. That they like something easy to transfer, something that's kind of a no-brainer, so that if the loan goes into default, they can go, yeah, give me the keys to your car, I'll flip it on Carvana, and I'll get my money and pay the loan off right away, or at least reduce the balance outstanding on the loan to the extent of the value they received. So this is all normal lending process as an attempt by the lender to keep the risk as low as possible. And if they can't get it low enough, then they're probably not going to make the loan. And then that's part of the reason why mortgage financing hasn't found its place in Belize yet, because there simply are not systems in place that make it quick, easy, and almost painless for a lender to recover their loan money.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, obviously, we have a mortgage and a foreclosure process, and Belize is based on British common law, so it's a pretty straightforward law system that you can follow. So we have all those procedures in place, but like you said, most foreign banks or U.S. basically U.S. banks, they're not set up down there, so they don't have the attorney set up yet. They don't know exactly what the foreclosure process is, even though it's pretty straightforward. But they just don't know. So that's why the U.S. lenders are hesitant to go there. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the real estate market is too small. I mean, if a U.S. lender is going to go into Mexico, that's a different story, because Mexico is a much bigger real estate market, way huge. So that's one of the issues in Belize. But like I mentioned, there's one lender that I've been working with, and they're moving forward with issuing loans down there.
Okay. So switching maybe from real estate over to agriculture, if I want to buy myself a coconut plantation,
Yeah.
does this change the funding picture altogether, or am I looking at kind of the same situation?
I mean, you're going to be looking at the same situation, but obviously, if you're buying a big business, I mean, your lender is going to look at the cash flow of the business and the success of it. So and also any buyer. I mean, a buyer wants to buy. If an investor is buying a property for an investment, they also want to make some return. So they're going to look at the numbers too. And if the numbers are good enough for an investor and they're supported by data, actual data, then those numbers should then work for the lender as well. And we have coconut farms for sale. We have orange plantations, banana farms. Those are probably right now the three biggest categories. Belize has always been a big agricultural country. It's shifting away, not away, but it's shifting more towards tourism now. But it still has a very major agricultural component of the economy. You have sugar, oranges, bananas, and then like shrimp and seafood are going to be your biggest product in terms of agriculture. And now coconuts are getting really, really popular, and there are some rather large coconut plantations in Belize now.
Yeah. So I one of the things that Boris and I have worked together on is we have put together an educational program for the University of Denver, where once a year we take some grad students down to Belize, and we essentially look at Belize and in a comparative nature with how's it done in Belize compared to how's it done in the United States. And we were down at the port last time, where they were hauling in truck after truck of sugarcane,
Yeah.
and loading the ship of immense size, where it's like one big sugar inventory there that
Yeah.
that was really cool to watch.
Yeah.
Um, We also got to go out and visit one of the local coconut farms, and that was a great experience for everybody in the group, where we were learning the different varieties of coconuts and
Yeah.
how long it takes from when you plant to when you can first harvest. And then, depending upon the varieties, it was 3 to 7 years. And if you think about that from a business standpoint, this would be like buying an orchard in Oregon or something, where you say we're going to grow apples. Or you plant the tree, you don't harvest the first year. There's a long lead time between starting a plant of that nature
Yeah.
till it starts producing, and then it reaches a yield where it can pay back the investment in that particular thing. So yeah, there are opportunities to buy plantations, farms, whatever you might imagine in the agricultural area in Belize. And but these are purchases of businesses, and as Boris said, they want to see actual data, not just data.
Yeah. I've got a lot of data in Belize. I'm like, okay. I need factual data. I just don't need data.
Yeah, no, but this is an issue that comes up repeatedly with me when somebody comes to me and says they want to raise funding for the first time, where up to that point they've either put up all the money themselves, or they have depended upon their friends and family to put up money who aren't looking at the books.
Yeah.
But once you start going outside of that circle, you're going to people you don't know. You're now having to conform with securities laws at the state and federal level. And there are what they call disclosure requirements. This is the data that an investor candidate has to be able to see in order for this to be a valid transaction according to the regulators. And quite often, this is a challenge, particularly for small businesses whose books and records may have been kept, a series of receipts in a box underneath the cash register, or some lesser formal way of tracking, whether they're doing good or doing bad. So if you are thinking about buying a business in Belize, yeah, you'll want to have the books looked at. It would be good for you to have somebody who's familiar with the market, with the industry, with that particular business to give you some feedback. And this is part of the role, Boris, that you play is helping buyers get that kind of information.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's I've been involved in Belize now for 32 years. First started going down as a tourist, and then really falling in love with the country and the people, and realizing there are lots of real estate and investment opportunities down there. So I've been involved in the country for a long time. So primarily in the real estate sector, but I've also been involved in some renewable energy and some agricultural items as well. And I have a full service brokerage firm down in Belize. We're the largest, like, privately owned firm in Belize, and we can definitely help put the numbers together for you, factual numbers, and get the data together, and see about permits in place and approvals and all those kind of things. We've been down that road many times. We know about how to get a hotel license, how to get a property subdivided. I know pretty much all the attorneys and builders and stuff in Belize, so I get some actual real numbers on what it would cost it, to clean out, let's say 100 acres of land, clear it out, put irrigation in, plant the trees, set up the facility. I can help with all that, and make the investment packet realistic so that it makes sense. Yeah.
Well, very good. Yeah, that's something also about Belize, where we're not quite so siloed in 20 different specialties to get a single transaction done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes here in the United States, you're going, okay, what other person did I forget to invite to the party in order to figure out what's going on here? So Zach just threw up another question. Says, are farm sales slowing down and moving towards tourism because of a lack of interested buyers looking to purchase those farms?
That's a good question. I would say the interest in the farms has actually picked up. I mean, due to the global sort of food issues, agricultural issues ongoing, um, and land prices really going up in a lot of countries. Belize has a lot of land. It's a very low population. There's only 400,000 people, so we have a lot of very good arid land. We have plenty of sunshine, which obviously is needed for growing agriculture, and then we have plenty of water. We get rain. We have lots of rivers in Belize, and we have a solid labor force. And we have the infrastructure in place, plenty of highways, and we have two deep water ports and stuff. So I think there is definitely an increase in the interest in the industry, especially with coconuts that have really picked up a lot. Coconuts are a very robust product. They're easy to harvest. They're easy to transport. You can really do a lot with coconuts. You can sell the meat on the inside, which is the white part. You got coconut water, which is obviously really popular these days. And then you can use the husk for like potting soil. And then you can use the bare, what's left over of the actual shell or the nut. You can use that for ornate things, artwork and stuff. So there's lots of ways to utilize coconuts. And I think the demand is just really high for picking up these kind of agricultural parcels because of prices going up everywhere in the world. We have some clients from India who are looking to buy some farmland in Belize, and they're looking at 10, 20, 30,000 acres because in India, farmland has gotten extremely expensive. And you would think India is a really big country and there's plenty of land. But what's happening, according to the investors that I've talked with, the big cities are getting bigger and they're expanding. So everybody's speculating that the land around the cities is going to be worth more money. So then investors are buying up the land to flip it later. So the prices keep going up and up and up. So that's taking up a lot of the agricultural land. Also here in the U.S., as you guys all know, the old song where they're, paving paradise, right? Getting a piece of land and putting concrete on in a parking lot. Same thing's going on with the farmland in Belize. I mean, in the U.S., the small farms are getting consolidated into bigger farms. So I think, and all these countries are trying to become more independent from the rest of the world due to all the different wars going on and all the political turmoil everywhere. So I think Belize is a great place for farm investing. Property taxes are low. You can still pick up land there, $1,000 an acre. You got river frontage, you got plenty of water, and so it's a really good product. The problem is a lot of people don't know about it. So as the word gets out, we're getting more and more foreign investors looking to buy land in Belize for farming.
Yeah, is the farmland taxed in the same way as the beachfront house?
I'm not sure if there's probably a different bracket, but it's still extremely low. Yeah, I mean, you're talking about thousands of acres. You're talking about $1,000 in taxes. I mean, it's super low. Yeah, it's no, yeah, it's not going to break the bank. And that's a
Great.
nice thing too. If you're buying raw land and you're going to build some kind of agricultural farm on it, obviously cash flow is going to be important. You're not going to have any cash flow until whatever you're producing is going to start harvesting, being able to get harvested and actually turn into product. So that may take 2, 3, 4 years or a little bit longer. And if you have a minimal property tax, that helps with your cash flow, obviously. So that's one big benefit in buying some of the agricultural land in Belize.
Well, very good. We've got here Harvey Tuck has joined the show from the UK. Says, hi, Carl. Great to be here. Sorry I'm late. Nice to meet you, Boris. Loving your new background. Yes, I got up here on Saturday and got to see the Christmas tree lighting ceremony by the mayor of Vail. And he was bragging about they had just received 20 inches of new snow and skiing on the mountains was as good as it was ever going to get. So he invited the entire world to come on down to Vail and go skiing. If you're into skiing, give it a try. But it is a little chillier here. It's actually only in the low 20s at the moment, but it'll get up to around 45 to 50 degrees later today. So we're kind of vacillating between freezing and non-freezing here. Harvey actually, one of his many jobs is he works with a coffee franchise. Is coffee a product that's grown in Belize?
Yeah, it actually is. Coffee and cacao, chocolate are becoming more and more popular in Belize. I mean, Belize does have some elevation, has some mountains, especially in the southern part of Belize, in the district called the Toledo district. That's where most of the coffee gets harvested, and we have really good coffee. I have some friends in Denver who are coffee connoisseurs, and they always ask me, please bring back Belize coffee because they think it's so great. And yeah, so we have coffee, and also, like I said, cacao, which is cacao actually. History says it sort of originated in the Belize sort of area with the Mayans and all that. So we have great chocolate as well.
Okay, well, now we're talking my talk, chocolate.
Yeah.
Chocolate and coffee.
Yeah, chocolate, coffee, tequila. We're all set. Yeah.
Yeah, we're all set. If a person wants to do business in Belize, you suggested that for property purposes, they set up a company that's a Belizean company, and then they set up a second company which holds the rights to the Belizean company. How difficult is that as a process? What cost? Who's involved?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. I mean, to set up a U.S. company is pretty straightforward. You can set that up online. At least in Colorado, it takes you 10 minutes and $50, I think it is. The Belize company, you would need to set up, hire either a local attorney or a local consultant that can set up a company for you. It just takes a couple of days. It's not very expensive. I think to set it up is probably $1,000, and then I think you have an annual filing fee of like $500 or something like that. And then you have your annual reporting that you update who the directors are, and the shareholders, and addresses and local contact, and that's about it. You do that annually and fill out the form, and that's pretty much it. Yeah, it'll take you a couple of days to set it up.
Okay. So yeah, that's not an obstacle that is going to get in the way of making it down there.
And also, I mean, if you have a U.S. company and you want to just buy it in the U.S. company on your personal name, you buy it in personal name. You don't have to set up anything. You just transfer the title. And if you want to hold title by the U.S. company, all you have to do is register the company in the U.S. to do business in Belize. So you go to the company registry, file your company. It's a U.S. company called whatever, XYZ Incorporated, and then you file the paperwork in Belize, the directors, contact information, all that, and then you register it in Belize. And that way, when you go to buy a property in the company name, you're already registered to do business in Belize.
Very good. We've talked about investing in real estate. We've talked about investing in agriculture. I believe earlier you said that you're working on some other things dealing with energy and recycling and some things along that line. What does that look like as far as investment goes? Are we talking about the same investors, the same type of funding structure, or are we taking a new path?
Yeah, the bigger projects obviously are more complex. And as you mentioned, you got to have your finances in order and track record and all that. So there's definitely some opportunities in Belize for outside of the real estate and hospitality sectors. Belize is a country that needs more energy, especially green energy. Right now, we get most of our power, or around 50%, from Mexico. And unfortunately, most of the Mexican power is generated still by diesel generators, so it's not very good for the environment. And also, Mexico doesn't have enough power for what they need. So Belize definitely is a country that needs more power. The government's interested in more renewable energy projects. It's just a very challenging process to go through, because I've been through that process in Belize, and it can be very challenging. For certain sectors, it's tough. Yeah, just due to, I wouldn't say red tape, but just delays and the political contacts and how all that works. So some sectors are probably best avoided due to that. But there's tons of opportunities in all kinds of sectors in Belize. Right now, the tourism is growing. The real estate market is growing. We have a lot of call centers in Belize, actually. There's a couple of big U.S. companies who have big call centers set up there. We have a smart, educated, well-established workforce in Belize. And, the minimum wage is very low. So call centers make sense. We also have, other sectors, like we mentioned, agriculture. And then you have just all kind of opportunities, environmental study, ocean research. There's all kind of stuff going on in Belize.
Yeah, so we didn't mention it, but English is the official language of Belize. It is a former colony of Britain as British Honduras. and as a result, all the documents are in English.
Yeah, that
Uh,
helps a lot.
if you've ever tried to read a mining claim or any other document in foreign language,
Yeah.
you may often stumble over words you're going, I'm not sure that the meaning they have here is what I was looking for. And it can cause a little bit of confusion and sometimes some grief later on.
So Carl, you're saying you don't know the language of Kazakhstan or something like that?
I do not, and I probably, having been born and raised in Kansas, have a hard time just pronouncing the word. So we,
Yeah, it's a
I,
big benefit for sure having English as the common official language. It helps not with just documents, but also just communicating with the local labor force and your colleagues and all that. So it makes a big difference.
yeah, I had a project once on some mining claims for titanium in Guinea, Africa, and I got pretty good at reading French, so I could locate the property with Google Maps, and we could put together some investment packages to better describe places that were very difficult to get to and sometimes impossible to get to during parts of the year. Um, so it sounds like we've covered everything except islands, and I know that everyone somewhere probably on their bucket list is interested in owning an island. So is an ownership of an island different from any other real estate?
It actually is not. Belize is one of the few countries where you actually get full ownership of an island. My real estate company, BMA, we're one of the largest, not the largest island broker in Belize. And we've done a lot of island transactions. So yeah, you get fee simple title to your island. You own it forever and ever. If you pass away, it goes to your next of kin. Again, low property taxes on an island, anywhere from $500, a couple $1,000s a year in taxes, and you own the whole island. It's all yours to do what you want with it. We obviously have some restrictions on development. If you're in a reserve or something like that, you have a little bit more scrutiny. But yeah, the islands are great. They're a great investment. They keep going up in value every year. We get more and more demand for them. Supply keeps dwindling, but demand goes up, so prices keep going up. Years ago, especially during COVID, you could get a really small island for $250,000. Now that's no longer possible. And islands that were originally maybe 500 or 600 are up in the millions now. So, but prices keep going up, the demand side. So, yeah.
Just like Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But in this case, you have actual sand underneath your feet.
And palm trees, fishy swimming around.
Yeah, all those good things.
Yeah, you could be like Tom Hanks, right? You could have a coconut as a partner.
Yeah, that or a volleyball. I'm not sure which is better.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's interesting because you've seen some interesting developments down there on the island, some of which are purely private, places of refuge.
Yeah.
And then we have the resorts. Which is private resorts similar to what you see on the cruise lines, where they go, hey, we're going to stop at our own private island, on day 4 on our cruise trip. And that's what these are. These are islands that have been purchased by the cruise lines that they use for that purpose.
Yeah, there's one in Belize, called Harvest Key. Yeah.
Yeah. So all good things. So I think that covers a broad range. Any other type of funding that you might think of that we haven't covered yet today?
No, I think the fractional is a good approach. The owner financing that's available occasionally down in Belize, and hopefully this bank that I've been working with is going to come through and have a reasonable banking mortgage program set up in Belize. And right now, as I mentioned earlier, there's Key Bank in Belize on San Pedro that will do some lending in U.S. dollars. And there's options, but it's not like here in the U.S. where you just go into your local bank and fill out the loan app.
Well, that's the way it used to be anyway.
So, yeah.
The banks have gotten very tight on extending credit these days, and it's getting harder and harder, and the interest rates have been elevated substantially over the last few years. Part of that is simply the Fed's changing their policy on money, but also inflation has crept into the entire capital market. So
Yep.
it's sometimes hard to tell what is the true cost of money going forward. But that's like allows us to cover most of the bases for today. Boris, I appreciate you being a guest with me this morning.
Yeah,
Boris
definitely.
has his company. Let's see, it's Boris Mannsfeld and Associates. I'll throw this up on the screen. I happen to have that handy. Good
Yep.
for me. And if you want to reach out to Boris, if you have any questions about doing something in Belize, and happy to work with someone who wants to put together a fractional ownership pool or otherwise put together some kind of an investment vehicle to get into Belize for either tourism, personal property, or some agricultural property, plus maybe some other types of businesses. So that covers it for today. We'll appreciate everyone who was in the audience today. Thank you for your questions and comments. And we'll be back next Tuesday.
Thanks, Carl. Appreciate it
Okay.
very much. Yeah, thanks for having me. I enjoyed it very much. And I'm always available to help with anything regarding Belize. If you just want a quick vacation, where to go, what to do, what not to do, just reach out to me.
Sounds good. Can you hold on for a moment, Boris, or do you got to jump?
Yep.
Okay. Well, thank you. We're going to close